Hi everyone, this is Trisha, and today I'm going to be talking about how we made our decision to go virtual online and how to go between virtual versus in-person schooling, because it has been a really tough decision. So why did I make a slideshow? Well, besides being a complete geek, if you know us, you know we vacillate a lot. And so we went into a pretty extensive decision-making process that I thought would be pretty helpful, and also I wanted to share with you. So in order to save you time as you think about things, and if you are interested in hearing. So with that, I will start. The first step that we did that was really helpful for me, at least, is I started thinking about this as a risk assessment. And that was advice from my friend, a physician named Andrew Sitzman. And one of the things he said to his patients is think of like COVID almost like HIV. Like, how comfortable do you feel having unprotected sex? How comfortable do you feel with risk? And that really hit me. And especially when I went back and looked at the CDC guiding principles, because one of the first things they do is talk about what the lowest risk level is, what would be more of like a moderate risk, and then the highest risk. Um, and so if you look here, one of the things they say is the lowest risk is when is virtual only, whereas moderate risk is this definition of small in-person classes, activities, and events. Students are 6 feet apart. It's hybrid. There are staggered and rotating schedules. So that would be moderate. And then high risk is pretty much going back to the old model. Now, after I kind of thought about that, I said, okay, what is our family's risk assessment? What do we do financially? Does that same as health? And, generally, and to a certain extent, going back, we're kind of a low risk family. So that kind of hit me because I started thinking, well, why? Already starting to be a little skeptical of more risk, but I thought it would be helpful for me to go in then and look at some of the specific physical definition features that are associated with risk, just to make sure, because there's some benefits as well, and of going back. And I wanted to see if I would sit well with being in the more risk category. Okay. So what I did is I assessed the environment of the school according to the CDC recommendation, and I compared what I could find in the school district plan. So an example, one of the recommendations for the CDC is to have ventilation systems that increase circulation, but I noticed in the school district plan that nothing was mentioned. The CDC recommended modify layouts with ideal seating 6 feet apart. I noticed our school district said modified layouts, but it was to maximize physical distancing. There's actually no promise for 6 feet apart. I think they did talk about desks facing all the same direction. I appreciated that. The CDC talks about using literally closing cafeterias, dining halls, playgrounds. These should be closed for shared spaces. But that was not the school district plan. They have these special protocols for safe recesses, which is great, but again, not as conservative as that more risk level that I would feel more comfortable with. The CDC also recommended increased routine scheduling, cleaning frequently touched surfaces like doors and handles of playground equipment, at least daily, but between use as much as possible. And I felt like the district was pretty consistent here with that. And then finally, they talked about physical guides to ensure 6 feet apart. And actually, this is kind of what got us, is they used the term airplane arms. And I looked at my daughter's arms, and they're really actually only about 2 feet, and she's in 4th grade. So realizing that 6 feet, I think it's a really cool, interesting mnemonic, but I feel a little more comfortable if it was a little bit further. Okay. What else? What about health behavior promotion? Okay, so the CDC says for moderate risk, we should be developing policies that encourage sick students to stay at home and make sure that families are aware of those policies. And that doesn't mean it's not coming, but we couldn't find a policy. We did see some of this in the guiding principles, but I know our school in the past has always really given lots of awards for attendance. So this is going to be a completely opposite change for them, and I wasn't sure how that would go down. In addition, there's a CDC recommendation to monitor adherence to hand washing in our school, especially for young ones. They said there would be frequent hand washing, but I didn't hear a lot of people or a lot of staff available to wash those kids, make sure those kids are actually washing their hands well. I did appreciate that there would be hand sanitizer in the classrooms, but I also wondered about these big common areas and how hand sanitizer would be used, especially before eating. The CDC also says hands should be washed immediately after sneezing, and I just don't know how that's going to happen in a classroom every time a kid sneezes. Maybe that's when hand sanitizer will come in. I'm just not sure. And then finally, the CDC recommendation was face coverings are important. They'd be great to wear, but they're most essential when physical distancing is difficult, and that kids need to be reminded not to touch the mask. And I think we all are immediately like, how are you going to get a kid to do that? And it's really hard. I do appreciate the district saying that face coverings are absolutely going to be worn, but it did say that it's per the city mandate. So we kind of wonder what's going to happen when that city mandate lifts. So it makes us a little bit concerned. Okay, the next major area is operations. And again, these are just examples. There are certain things that the district's doing that we didn't list, and same with, but just kind of picking and choosing. So CDC recommends that students be offered options for virtual learning, and the district plan is options. Obviously, we're given an option right now, virtual on in person. But one of the things that makes me uncomfortable is that you can only go to remote learning at identified intervals. And I understand there's a continuity issue for in-person classes, but it would be nice to have more synchronized options that didn't limit parents about when they could go in and go out if they suddenly felt uncomfortable if something were happening on district property. Also, the CDC has recommendations for to limit non-essential visitors, and our district does a pretty good job about that. They say no outside visitors except or volunteers, unless it's for the safety and protocol of students, and that visitors must follow safety protocols and parents don't go beyond the front office. So that's nice to know they're working on that. The CDC recommendation is to pursue virtual activities instead of events. And the district plan was a little bit vague. It was unclear whether assemblies and special events are going to be happening in person. It did mention that they would be having them, but it also did say that meetings will all take place virtually. So that's good. The CDC also recommends having small groups and keeping them together, like small cohorts that move together through the school, and to try to limit mixing between the groups. And so it includes staggered scheduling. And neither of these were mentioned in the plan, so we're not sure how that would work. And especially if you kind of think about middle school when they go from class to classroom. So I'm not sure if there was any thoughts about teachers moving versus students or anything like that. Designated school nurse, and so this was not mentioned in the district plan, but I believe we received some information from our school that nursing hours would be increased, which is great. It said that there would be systems in place for self-reporting positive tests. That's what the CDC would like, but we did not see that in the plan. And then the CDC also recommends daily health checks and temperature symptom screenings. And our district says that health screenings could be conducted regularly for individuals on property, and it may occur anytime, but it didn't promise that there would be daily screens. Okay. The third area is to prepare for sickness, and this was an area which maybe staff have information about, but things like isolation room or transport or how things would be addressed when kids got sick, that wasn't given in materials to parents yet. And it may be given, we just we haven't mentioned that yet. And we still have like 3 weeks to go before making a decision. So that made me a little nervous that we didn't have that information yet. We're being asked to make a decision. Okay, so what was our risk assessment? Well, looking at these CDC guiding principles, again, our assessment is that the district actually is not at more risk. They're probably between more and the highest risk, which helped clarify for me as a parent who tends to go a little bit more between lowest, and I like to think of myself between lowest and more risk. That makes me a little uncomfortable. So this helped clarify my decision. But But I also found that there were other considerations I was having. For instance, um, I was a little bit nervous. On the one hand, I wonder if mental health is better for my kids in school, but then I started thinking school's not going to look the same. There's going to be new rules. There's going to be masks. I remembered when I went to the grocery store for the first time since COVID broke out, and how hard it was to adjust to those new schemas. So I have a daughter that kind of has some anxiety, and I started wondering if actually maybe going to school with these new guidelines might create more anxiety, especially when she's seeing anxious teachers and anxious staff. So I thought maybe, we can't really count on mental health getting better when she goes back. I also had a lot of thoughts about leadership. I think, we're in a country right now that's in the middle of a huge, giant political divide. And one of the things I was wondering is the, and I kind of seeing some leadership differences and ways that it's created a lot of confusion about policy and safety. So one of my questions is the principal at our school empowered to enforce non-adherence to the guidelines? Like, what if a kid comes in and they just refuse to wear a mask? Will the student be required to attend virtual, or like what's going to happen there? So that, I know I saw the wording that the child will be strongly encouraged to wear a mask, but I don't know what that means, and at what point that child, how long do we have to go before that child needs to go to virtual? Exceptional education is an issue for GATE and for IEPs, and we noticed in person that there's no pullout for exceptional education, and that all electives are all online anyway. So those kind of added to our thought processes. I also just thought it would be I started thinking, well, what are the benefits? Because I was originally pulled towards in person, and I just, I think it's really important that in-person teaching and support, I personally don't think you can rival it with virtual. So I just want to mention that is there. Maddie was pretty frustrated with some of those adaptive testing programs that they did last spring. So there's certainly benefits of in-person. There's also in-person socialization. I think that's really, with peers, is really unique. You can get that virtually. I also think that a lot of people who experience benefits of in-person, there might be other issues like food security, and safety issues at home. So I just want to say there are multiple benefits. And then finally, in-person supports working families, and we're fortunate enough that we have some flexibility in our schedule to work from home. But I just want to acknowledge that having food on the table is the number one thing. So so that could drive everything, so you can see how the differences in decisions are really important to consider. Okay, now I also just want to say, here we are, like in-person, pros or cons, but there are pros and cons of virtual too. And this was just our brainstorm. And I think the process could be really helpful if you do that with your family. So some pros of virtual that we came up with was that actually we think we're going to be in and out a lot, and virtual could be more stable and continuous learning. Once they learn the system, they've learned it. And we really did not like virtual last spring, but right now we're hearing that classes are going to be taught online by teachers using TUSD curriculum. So that makes us feel better that and it's actually teachers teaching. So we're hopeful. And there are some other pros, like it seems like kids can still do athletics, there's special programs, there's special ed teams, there's going to be technology and technical support, they say. And also just that online models are not new. Lots of kids homeschool, and it seems like they work well for some kids. So those are the pros. The cons of virtual is obviously screen time is really not great. And, there's less in-person socialization with peers. And, Maddie had she still has a hard time judging like how to ask questions and when she's talking too much or too little. So we worry about that online, and it's unclear whether teachers will be skilled with online instructions. Other cons that we thought about is that someone has to be home, and even that home person is going to get interrupted at work. So that's a bummer. And then there's just the Wi-Fi issue. So those are our risks and benefits of virtual, which I'm kind of running through. It's late, but you kind of get the picture. Okay. And then finally we said, okay, well, obviously we're leaning towards virtual. Is there any way we can mitigate the cons? And this is the real hidden reason I'm doing the PowerPoint, is to see if any of you would be interested in helping us figure out ways we can mitigate the cons. So for instance, screen time is not great. And we recognize that there's really just nothing we can do here except encourage more outdoor and in-person activities in their free time. So one of the things we're doing is extracurriculars, like can we find a way to use our neighbors' tennis courts? Can we, how can we keep piano lessons going? Can we do online drama? So just, yeah, it's still screen time, but at least it's, like I make my kids go on a walk every night. Like how can we learn new crafts? So really looking at this as a way to be adaptive. Less socialization with peers. Well, I agree in person's better, but how much worse are virtual playdates really? I mean, my understanding is that that's what teenagers do anyway. And with Maddie, my fourth grader, we've actually noticed that she's socializing more than she ever has with COVID. And frankly, we're not totally opposed to breaking the bubble with a small number of families, and maybe that is much less risky than going to school anyway. So kind of thinking, well, I mean, is my assumption correct that we can't mitigate that? Okay, what about harder to ask questions, learn from a teacher online? Well, technically this could be, if we get into real bad binds, we've heard that some people are, we try to help out with Maddie and we're covered in most of her work, but we have heard that some people are hiring individual tutors or retired teachers through care.com. So it's good to know that there's a resource out there. And then what about teachers and their ability to teach online? Well, personally, I'm a teacher and I question my own ability to teach online, but we won't really know until it happens. And just like you can get a negative online teacher, you can also get one that is negative in person. So it's just hard to, when I say negative, I mean, it's all about skill, but it's just really hard to know. Okay, what about requiring someone to be at home with your child? Well, you can ask for adjusted work schedule or hire a babysitter. Those are possibilities, but I also know that especially for essential workers, they might not have that luxury. Work interruptions by a child. Well, we're trying to work with Maddie on teaching office hours. So what are good times for her to interrupt us? Can we contain those interruptions? And then also consider rotating shifts. Like my husband takes questions this day, I take questions the next day. So trying to figure out a little bit more of the guidelines to be more accessible to her, but also to allow us some concentrated time to work. And then access to reliability. We've upgraded, but we mostly just cross our fingers here now. Okay, so we've gone through this whole logical progression. I just want to say that one of the things I noticed is that our first choice was in person, but we had that kind of uneasy feeling, at least I had it, that lingered, that kept like bugging me, so it kind of kept me talking to people. But then when I went through this process, I noticed I ended up with the decision to go virtual, and it's interesting. I feel definitely more confident and at peace with this choice. I don't really find myself needing for reassurance as much that it's safe. I also feel sad about the upcoming year and opportunities that my daughter may be missing. But then I kind of remind myself that I can potentially change at that defined interval if things are going better. So I guess I bring that up because there's really no good choice. And I know that individual family decisions matter a lot. Everyone has their own things to consider, but I wanted to share our process, and I hope this was helpful for you. And sorry, I talked so much. All right.